Hey yo, Shane Thompson, Hockey Outsider Podcast, waiver wire look for week 14. I'll try to keep it a little bit more brief again this week as it's kind of late here. This is a very important week to be checking out how many games each team is playing. So I'll do that first. It's a really crazy week in the NHL. I'm not sure quite why the scheduling was made this way, but there's a lot of teams with very different amounts of games played this week. And if you are streaming guys in and out of your lineup, as I think most good teams should be doing, then you're going to absolutely need to be getting players out of your lineup and certain teams into your lineup. So here you can see, and this is a very rare, maybe the only week all year that it'll be like this, where you're going to see Anaheim and Boston there and Colorado with a single game. And there's more teams, like a lot of teams with a single game this week. And then you also, up at the top of the list there, you see there's three teams in a row: Calgary, Carolina, Chicago, all the C's except for that Colorado and Columbus, with four games. Also, teams with three games are important this week too. Columbus, Oilers have three games. Minnesota has four. And down lower here, Vancouver has three, Washington has three, and Winnipeg have three. Everybody else is two or one, and a lot of ones in there. So there's a lot of teams to avoid this week. So you got to be looking at that really carefully when you do your lineups this week. Now, if I actually get into my watch list, I'm just going to go to a single watch list from now on, and I'm going to look at some more guys that are not as deep. I had some comments last time that made sense where I'm getting a little too deep maybe for some people, and it's not that helpful if it's not showing players that are available in your specific leagues. So I'm going to go a little bit more closer to 40% owned and lower, maybe even a little bit higher than that if I think there's guys that are getting dropped in leagues. Excuse me. Now, this week, I did see a few guys that I was interested in. Zach Parise is still out there in 45% of leagues, and he's back and he's getting decent play time already. So he already got an assist. He's also with the Wild, who play four games this week, and if he's available in your league this week, he's absolutely a guy to add this week with those four games. I'm not a huge believer in Parise as an overall player, to be honest, but he does get a little bit of everything for you, and he's absolutely got value in a week where he plays four games. Another guy, not on a team that is playing four games this week, but Brassard was dropped in a few of my leagues, and I don't know why. And in 29% owned is under-owned, I think, at this point. He's doing great. He's got 27 points overall in the year. He's really seemed to heat up of late too. And if you have face-offs and hits in your as categories in your league and shots, look at that. He's just stuffing the stats on those side stats. I just like him as a player, and it looks like he's fitting in with Ottawa. Ottawa are still not playing well, but they're playing a little better, I guess. Their scoring is improved. They have definite issues with defense, and a lot of that, I think, comes from Carlson not being himself this year. But Brassard is a guy to own, and I was really surprised to see he's only 29% owned. He should be more than 29% owned. I think his upside is about 45, 50 points this year, but a lot of goals, and he gets those periphery stats as well, and faceoffs won, which a lot of leagues count. Here's a guy that's not as deep owned, but he was added in a lot of leagues, Riley Smith, and people are wondering how legit a lot of these Vegas players are. I think Riley Smith is legit. He was great a few years ago for Florida. Actually, he was playing in Boston then. He's absolutely an offensive focused player, but you can see he's getting points here without getting power play points as well, which isn't a good sign. Like, you'd prefer him to get power play points, but it definitely shows he can create his own scoring. And Vegas just keep rolling. Look at all those wins; it's unbelievable. You have to buy in at this point. He's not a great guy to add this week because they don't have a lot of games this week. You can see by the schedule there, the 13th, 16th, and 18th is not good. That's not enough games this week. So you're going to avoid him maybe this week, but he's legit, and 52% owned is a bit ridiculous. He's got 35 points. He's plus 19. Plus 19 is crazy. So just he's for people wondering, oh, he's sitting on your waiver wire. Who is Riley Smith? Is he any good? Well, he's absolutely good. I expect him to get about 60 points this year now. He'd have to really slow down to not hit 60 points. And he scores goals too, which gets forgotten in a lot of fantasy leagues. It's harder to score goals than it is to get assists. And there's a lot less guys who score goals. Another guy that I've been monitoring, and I've got him in this league, and I love him. Mikko Rantanen. I drafted him this year, got him nice and late, and good lord, he's been great. He's 41 points already. He's already eclipsed last year's point totals. But you notice that plus minus last year, minus 25, and this year he's plus 1. So that's a big change. I mean, analytically, plus minus is not a good stat, but I think it does show a little bit of something. And 16 power play points. He's a big reason why Colorado are a better team this year. And look, he's going to get 65 points for somebody. It's crazy to me that he is not owned in more than 65% of leagues. If he's somehow available in your leagues, he's as legit as it comes. He does nothing with his periphery stats. He is not going to get hits or blocks for you. But his power play points are a huge value in a lot of leagues. So if you're in one of those 35% of leagues where he's available, you got to have him. Absolutely. He's a great player, going to be good for the rest of his career probably. Tyler Myers is being dropped by a lot of people. He's actually plus 1 now, but he went down a lot in ownership during that little 5 or 6 game pointless streak. They have Dustin Byfuglien, who came back. I don't know how to say the name properly. I think I said it right. And a lot of people thought, oh, well, that's it. Myers is done. There's nothing. He's not going to do anything now. Well, look, he's got 2 power play points in 2 games, and he's got 3 points overall. So he's still got power play usage. He's got less minutes, maybe a minute or 2 less per game, but hey, he's been really solid this year. I mentioned him weeks and weeks ago, maybe a month or 2 ago. If you had grabbed him, then you've had yourself a solid defenseman. He's going to get 35 points this year at least, maybe closer to 40, and he's got a lot of power play points as well. People think because he's a big body guy, he's not got offensive skill. No. He is a former Rookie of the Year with 50 points, who absolutely looked like he was going to be a Pronger style, like big shot, scary, keeps the puck in the zone kind of guy, great on the power play. And then he had a couple bad years. Looks like he's got it back. Looks like he's matured, and he's going to be a solid, I would expect for years going forward, he's closer to a 40-point defenseman. Looks to me like he's matured into a solid hockey player on a very good team as well. Now, let me see. This is a guy I thought was interesting. Plays 4 games this week, Michael Furlan. Calgary seems to have a rotating group of guys that are maybe relevant for pickups, and this is the current guy. He's been really good, scoring a lot of goals. He's got about 6 points in 6 games, it looks like. They've also got 4 games this week. He's a worthwhile guy to add, and he gets hits and shots as well. So if you have hits and shots as a category, he's absolutely got value. He's just like a lot of these lower tier Calgary players, he's only good while he's good, and as soon as you see him cool off, you probably want to get rid of him. But he's getting more minutes right now, and he's playing pretty well. No power play points, very rare power play usage, so don't expect much that way from him. But he gets those other periphery stats, and I think this week he's a really good ad. 18% owned. That should go up a bit. Eric Johnson, people were grabbing him a couple weeks ago. I'm a big fan. I think Eric Johnson, when he came out, when he was drafted, he was going to be the next superstar defenseman. He hasn't really turned into that in his career, but he's absolutely turned into a defensively responsible defenseman, and he gets a huge amount of side stats. He's really good for blocks, really good for hits, and gets a lot of shots on goal. Doesn't get a lot done in the power play, as you can see, 0 power play points in all these games, but he's chipping in a few points on the occasion here. And those side stats, I really like having defensemen that get those periphery stats. And he's on pace to have a really good periphery season here. Probably in the hundreds for hits and probably in the hundreds, 150 area for blocks, which is really good, which is a really good season. Gets a few penalty minutes too. I'd say he's having one of his best years to date. He definitely 17 points last year, and he's got 16 already this year. That whole Colorado team have been worth having a lot of players on because of how much better they've been. Semi Vatanen in New Jersey, 21% owned. Starting to heat up with the Devils. And, he's a talented young player. He's actually gotten some serious penalty minutes in the last little while. But they're using him right. They're losing a lot of games right now. Be prepared if you're a Devils fan to see the bottom drop out of that team. But they're still scoring goals. And, he's worth looking at in deeper leagues. He's not a great guy for periphery stats. He gets some blocks, but he doesn't do a lot else. He had an 8-shot game there, one of his first games with New Jersey. So he's putting the puck on the net, getting a little bit of power play time, but not enough to really register. But he's worth looking at. He was looked at as a guy who could get 40 points about a couple years ago in Anaheim. I would think last year going into the draft, he was looking like a solid draft pick, and then he just kind of bottomed out. I think he's more likely a 30 to 35 point guy in his career. But that means he should heat up from this point forward for New Jersey. So he's worth a look in deeper leagues. Nick Schmaltz, I'll just quickly mention, only 20% owned. Wow, okay. I'll be more specific about this. He should be owned. Like, there's no way 20% owned is owned enough. They also have 4 games this week, so if you're in one of those 80% of leagues, this guy is tearing it up. And 22 minutes in his last 2 games, that's huge usage. So if somehow he's available, which is very common, he's not available in any of my leagues because people are on the ball, but he needs to be owned. Nick Schmaltz absolutely needs to be owned. He's on a great line. I believe he's with Kane right now. And with the 4 games this week, he could win you your matchup if he gets a couple big games for you. It looks to me like he's over a point per game in his last huge group of games there. So, like, you're looking at like 10 points, 10 games kind of thing. At the beginning of the year, people were taking flyers on him, thinking maybe he'd be on that line right away. Well, now he's on the line, so accept it and play him while he's in that role. There's no way that's one of the more confusing things I've seen this year. 20% owned Nick Schmaltz when he's been as hot as he has. Morgan Riley, I just want to mention. I mean, 78% owned, so he's not going to be really available. But this guy is breaking out in a large way. 30 points already this year, among the top defensive scorers in the NHL, and he's on a great team that can score and also is their number 1 PP defenseman, power play defenseman. So, geez, if you can somehow buy in a keeper league or a dynasty league, and it's too late now probably, but if you're the lucky owner of Morgan Riley, he's legit, and you're looking at a potential the next 50-point defenseman in the NHL, and with potential for more. Like, he's on pace for about 55, 60 now. I don't know if I would expect 60 from him, but I would expect 50. And he looks to me like the breakout defenseman, one of the breakout defensemen of the year, maybe the number 1. I just thought he was pretty impressive. Here's a guy I just added at the end of my matchup this last week to get me that last game. And he put me over the edge in goaltending stats. They've got Anton Forsberg and Chicago have a 4-game week this week. He's taken the job, it looks to me, like from Glass, which I didn't understand in the first place, why they put Glass in that role. And it totally backfired for Chicago. Now they've put Forsberg back in. He said all the right things, like he should have a chip on his shoulder. He has to play like he needs to win the job. Blah blah blah. I like him this week. Throw him in there. I think for some of those starts, 15% owned is too little. He should be closer to 25 until Crawford shows he's healthy. And he's probably still available in a lot of your leagues. He was available to me last night, and I got him. I might be dropping him because I've got pretty solid goalies. I kind of just needed him for that one game, but I feel weird about dropping him because I might give him to an opponent. I think I might even wait a little bit later into the matchup just to, not allow other people to be using him against me. Okay, going down here. Travis Konechny has been really heating up. He's a 3% owned. This is a very under-owned player right now. He's a very talented player too. So his minutes have gone up. His minutes have risen. His output has risen, and I mean you're only going to want him in the deeper leagues. Absolute the deep, like we're talking 14 team, very deep roster kind of leagues. But I like him as a player, and I've always, even when he came up last year, I liked him as a player. Watch his minutes. If his minutes stay around 15. You can expect good things from him. If his minutes get back down to 12 or 11, don't expect too much. Let me see here. Just want to mention Burakovsky, who's a player that is... So Burakovsky, 28% owned, but Schmaltz is 20% owned. What's going on? Like, I have no understanding of that. Burakovsky's done nothing. He's just done nothing. He has been healthy scratched a couple of games, 8 minutes the 2 games before. He was in the coach's doghouse. Like, I just don't see what people see in Burakovsky. They see they see the Russian name, and they just think, oh, he's going to become Kuznetsov, or he's going to be great. No, he's done nothing, and let him prove it before he's owned 28% in 28% of leagues. I have no understanding of that, and that needs to change right away. He needs to be dropped, and if you have Burakovsky, drop him and add Schmaltz. There's other guys there as well that there's no way. I would prefer Ferland, big time. And Ferland's not even a guy that I'm that interested in, but I like him more than Burakovsky right now. Okay, other guys a little bit lower on the list here. Let's see. Spooner's still scoring. Not a big fan of Spooner as an overall player, but he's still scoring. And, he's a guy that when he gets minutes, he scores. Absolutely, he scores. There's a bit of an attitude thing, I think, with him in the dressing room. He doesn't get a lot of usage. I think his defensive play is not that strong. But he is in the lineup right now, and he is scoring points. So he might be 3% owned is under owned because he is a guy that if he gets minutes is potential to get 60 points. He's that good offensively. But I would monitor him. He doesn't play enough this week to really add, but he's worth taking a look at for sure in deeper leagues. Like he's owned in this league, as you can see. Let's see. Ryan Hartman, also Chicago, playing 4 games this week, 9% owned. Looks to me like he's going to be playing on that second line, is what it's saying there. He's been playing well. He got 20 minutes his last game, got an assist. He's been getting close to a point per game over his last 5. So, I mean, he also gets hits. He's a guy who gets solid amount of hits and shots on goal. He's a former first-round pick, end of the first round. So he is, for Chicago, they don't have a lot of first-round picks. You got to remember, this is a team that doesn't generally keep their first-round picks or get very late first-round picks. So he's as good a young prospect as they have in their system. And he's playing really well right now. He's got a good role. And for 4 games, I'd rather him than Burakovsky as well. So I think he's worthwhile adding this week. Nate Schmidt is being added in a lot of leagues. Not a big fan. I don't know why he's being added so much. Doesn't get any power play time. He's pretty good defensively, but not doing a lot. Like he is not shooting the puck that much. His last 2 games he did, but all the games before that is 1 or 2 or 0. Not really a guy who gets hits, gets some blocks, but not that many. And yeah, he's getting some points, but they're all even strength points. And I just don't think he's that great of a hockey player. It's nice that he's getting the minutes in Vegas, and it is cool that they keep winning, but I'm not that interested. Esa Lindell, 15% owned, is dropped in my league right here, and I've considered adding him. I think he's solid, and I think he's a little bit underrated. He's along the lines of like a Sekaras last year. He doesn't do anything wrong. He doesn't do anything to hurt you at any point. He's plus all the time. He gets a solid amount of blocks, solid amount of hits, gets some power play time, and gets a few points. Like he'll probably get close to 30, 32, 35 points this year. And, that's pretty good for a young defenseman. In keeper leagues, he's worth looking at because he is a young, talented defenseman on Dallas. And Dallas are perennially a good scoring team. So I just think his 15% ownership might be a little low. And I would look at upping that a little bit. Lower down here, this is a guy I added in a few leagues. Hinostroza. Okay, Vinny Hinostroza. He's lower owned than Hartman and Schmaltz, but he's performing just as well. He's got about 7 points in his last 5 games. That's super solid. And he's not getting the power play time really, but he's still, he's putting the puck in the net right now. And he's if you like DeBrincat in Chicago, you'll like this guy. He's also, scoring first kind of player. And Chicago seems to get a lot out of these guys for stretches of their seasons. And looks like this is a hot stretch for Hinostroza. So 4-game week, deeper leagues, for sure he's worth trying out for a little bit. Expect him to cool down, but for now, why not? Here's a guy that I just think gets no love whatsoever, Derek Ryan. I actually had him in this league, and I might add him again. I might add him back today. He gets a lot of PP time for them. A fair bit, not that much PP time. Sorry, mistake there. But he does get face-offs for them. Solid amount of hits, and since he's come up a couple years, I think last year, he's just kind of put up points and been pretty consistent in that. He's got 23 points right now. And 23 points at this point in the season is about, I think, a 45-point pace. 40, maybe 40. It's not amazing, but he's solid, and he's got a 4-game week this week. And for sure, I think in a 4-game week, a guy like this should be owned. Carolina is really hot right now, or they were really hot. They've kind of cooled down. They've lost 3 out of 4, but they were doing really well before that. And when he got hot, they got hot. So keep an eye on him. If you have face-offs in a league, he's got value there. And I think I would add him in those kind of leagues. Now, here's a guy who's moving up a lot in ownership, and for good reason. Daniel Sprong in Pittsburgh. And I mentioned Adam. He doesn't play a lot this week, so he might not have a lot of value this current week. But you got to keep an eye on guys like this in Pittsburgh because you just never know. He's shooting the puck a ton, and we've seen guys like Gensel and Sheeran go from pretty much unknowns from the AHL to NHL and point per game guys. So with Sprong having that 2 goals and an assist the other day, that might get him in the good books with the higher ups in Pittsburgh, and might get him more playing time. And you never know, that could lead to power play time, and then next thing you know, he's just going wild. So he's absolutely a guy to be looking at, and I think you don't maybe want to add him this week, but probably next week. If you get into that next week, if he's still available, I think he's worth looking at. Here's the last guy I'll mention, I think, but a guy that might be the top of my list of should be owned in more leagues. Jacob Chychrun is a guy who was hurt at the beginning of the year, a very Great looking prospect defenseman last year. Came in and right along with like Provorov and a few of those other guys. Wierenski, that whole generation of rookie defensemen came in and could play right away at a very young age. What Chychrun did that was different is he gets hits and blocks, and a lot of them. His pacing last year would have been very high for hits and blocks. Not a lot of offensive skill, it didn't look like last year. But what's kind of changed in his game is he's still getting the hits, he's still getting the blocks, but now he's putting lots of shots on net. You see those last group of games: 3 shots, 4 shots, 6 shots, 7 shots, 3 shots, 2 shots. And he's also, right along with that, had like a solid usage. 25 minutes in one game, 23. He's getting a lot of play time. Not that Arizona have a lot to play for, so why not put a guy like Chychrun in a more expanded role? He's still not getting power play points, but I think they're going to come. Especially if you keep shooting the puck at that pace, he's going to start getting points. And either way, his hits and his blocks will make up for a lot of those other deficiencies. So if you're in a categories league, so there's no way this guy should be owned in so few leagues. I've added him in this league, I think. Oh no, I haven't, but in my deeper league, I did add him. I think at the end of the year, you're going to see this guy outdoes his point total from last year, even with the injury that he had to miss a lot of games at the beginning of the year. And he's going to be one of those guys who really jumps up next year. But I still think he's got value in a categories league just based on those blocks and those hits. So I would take a look at him if you're in a categories league. A lot like Eric Johnson. This guy's got a similar value to Eric Johnson, and Eric Johnson's owned in 40% of leagues. So 2% is under-owned, absolutely. That's it. The only other guy, actually, Sam Girard, who's playing pretty well right now for Colorado. 1% owned. Wow, 1% owned. There's no reason he should be 1% owned. He's pretty much the antithesis of Chychrun. Chychrun's the guy who's going to get hits and blocks in all those categories, maybe chip in a point or two. Girard is a guy who's going to get points and power play points and nothing else. Like, absolutely nothing else. Not even really shots. He barely gets any shots, barely gets any hits, barely gets any blocks. But offensively, he's a dynamo. He's got skills, and they're not afraid to use him right away on the power play. And it's cashing in. So he's an interesting guy long term. I don't like having defensemen that don't get side categories, especially not blocks and hits, because where are you going to get your blocks and hits if you're not getting them from your defenseman? You're probably going to be behind the 8 ball in those categories, and I only play pretty much categories leagues. So he's not really a guy I like personally, but if you're in a more points-driven league, I think he's got value there. And you know what? If he's got power play time in Colorado, who are scoring a lot of goals and playing pretty well, why not have him? But he also, again, doesn't play I think he has 1 game this week, so he's not really valuable this week. So a lot of these guys you have to take with a grain of salt. The guys who do have 4 games this week, of the guys I mentioned, I didn't even really talk about Jankowski. Jankowski's also 1% owned, but he's a good young hockey player who's got a lot of skill. He's very young, and he's not going to be great this year probably. But with 4 games this week, he puts up solid amount of faceoffs and hits and is putting some shots on the net. So I don't mind him in very deep leagues this week with 4 games. So you got him with 4 games, Derek Ryan at the bottom of my list here. Hinostroza. Sekaras is still available in most leagues. They've got 3 games this week, and I think he'll heat up. This week I've got a feeling he'll get it going a little bit. A little bit up on the list here. Who else has got the 4 games? Hartman in Chicago. Osterley, if he's still available in your leagues, he got added in a fair bit of leagues over the week. I think he's worth adding. He's another guy that Edmonton let go. He's got the Edmonton jersey on in the picture. And, Edmonton, who need defense help more than anything. They need good young defenseman help. let this guy go who pretty much consistently throughout his minors career scored and seems to be like a pretty decent all-around defenseman. Now Chicago's got him and are using him properly. And he's getting 24 and 23 minutes and 25 minutes. So I don't see why not add him right now. He's especially with the 4-game week. He's putting up solid overall stats, like just really looking like a good player. We'll see if it lasts. I'm not totally sold on him, but with 4 games this week, for sure I'm sold to have him for this week. Other guys, let me see. Not a lot else. Anton Forsberg again, Chicago. Get those goalie wins this week, maybe. He's got some tough matchups. Nick Schmaltz needs to be owned in a lot more leagues. And Teravainen, if he's somehow available. Teravainen's in 39% of leagues. And, I mean, I don't understand that either. Teravainen should absolutely be owned in way more leagues. So people are sticklers in hockey fantasy. It's not like other fantasy sports. Like football is the exact opposite, where people will pick up the new running back who they've never even heard the name of just because he's on the right team. And people don't get stuck on certain players. Hockey, the young players, like nobody trusts ever. And you can win leagues just because people don't trust young players coming in and doing something, as long as you're the guy who adds them at the right time. I've actually got a league this year that I traded away a lot of my good picks because I went for the win last year. So I basically should have had no chance. I had no first rounder, no second rounder, and I'm competing in that league because I went very young and I committed to guys like Renton and etc. And they're paying off. And if you take a risk, I think the NHL is kind of changing to be a young man's game again. And a lot of these young players are coming in at 19, 20, 21, 22, and they're performing. So a guy like Teravainen, who's been around for a while actually, getting 33 points at this point in the year, there's no luck there. Like, he's going to have a career year. He's going to have 60 points or 55 points, and you're going to regret not buying in when he's only 40% owned. Anyway, that's just a little rant that I think I hope some people listen, because it's definitely a problem in fantasy hockey. It doesn't hurt me because I do well in my leagues, because a lot of the guys don't believe in these players. But you know what? I'll keep buying in on them. That's it. There's not a lot of other players here that have... Oh, the very last one there is Zach Parise at the very top of the list. Parise, good guy to add. I mean, he's still 45% unowned. So grab him this week. If he does great for you, good luck. But I mean, I don't like him long term. Really, I'm telling you, don't just add people willy-nilly this week. If you're making any ads this week, you need to check if they play 1 or 0 or 2 games. Like, you need guys that are getting that 4 or 3 game, and that's it. There's no use in adding any of those. It doesn't matter how good they are. Even if there's Derek Brassard, who you think is going to be great. You know what, man? If he plays 1 game this week, he's not going to be that great. So just be really careful of that this week. If you're not watching that, you're going to lose this week. You're going to be surprised that your juggernaut team somehow lost to somebody who just added the right players this week. So check it out. Make sure you're checking the daily face-offs, games played. And if you don't, you're probably going to lose. So keep an eye on that. There's probably not another week the whole year that you're going to have to worry about it as much. So take a little bit of extra time and focus on it this week, and you'll be surprised how much it will help you. Good luck. I will get into the next one, how my scoring in my leagues are actually broken down. But I think that's about good for today. And good luck out there. Go win your leagues.